They thought the lady.
Candyman. Candyman.
The movie begins in 1977 at the Cabrini Green housing projects. A young boy is playing with his toys when his mother asks him to go down and do the laundry. As he makes his way to the laundry room, he passes a few police officers. Left alone in the room, he suddenly hears someone humming. Moments later, a man with a hook for a hand appears from a hole in the wall. The boy screams, drawing the attention of the officers outside, who rush in to investigate. Fast forward to 2019, still in Cabrini Green, Troy Cartwright is introducing his boyfriend, Grady Greenberg, to his sister Brianna and her boyfriend, Anthony McCoy, at their new apartment. Grady feels a bit uneasy, but Troy reassures him as they make their way inside. During their visit, the conversation turns to local urban legends. Troy dims the lights, lights a candle, and begins telling a story about a woman named Helen Lyle. She was a student researching Cabrini Green's dark past, but her curiosity supposedly drove her to madness. According to Troy, she even kidnapped a baby, and a crowd eventually saved the child before Helen ended her own life in a bonfire. Afterward, Brianna jokes about her brother's flair for the dramatic, though Anthony hints there may be some truth to Troy's tale. The next morning, Anthony meets with Clive to showcase his latest work, but Clive isn't impressed. He expresses disappointment, recalling Anthony's early potential and the promise he showed as an emerging star in Chicago's art scene. Clive hints at considering a replacement for the summer show, frustrated that Anthony is the only artist yet to deliver a piece. Anthony mentions he's exploring the history of neglected communities, especially how white supremacy fosters systemic neglect, particularly in black neighborhoods. Clive encourages him to focus on powerful locations like Cabrini Green, implying it would resonate more strongly than Anthony's familiar Southside background. In search of fresh inspiration for his art, Anthony becomes captivated by the story and decides to explore Cabrini Green. While taking photos, he gets stung on his right hand by a bee. Unfazed, he got inside and took more pictures. As he is leaving, Anthony heard sirens and hid. Behind him, a man called out, and when he turns, the man introduced himself as William Burke, who shared insights about how Cabrini Green's police presence surged as the neighborhood's demographics began shifting. Anthony helps Burke carry his laundry to the laundry room, where Burke reveals the story of Candyman, a local figure of fear. For Burke, Candyman's myth began when he was a child and knew a man named Sherman Fields. Sherman, who had a hook for a hand, was known for giving candy to children. When a razor blade was found in a little girl's Halloween candy, Sherman became the prime suspect. Burke remembers unintentionally leading the police to Sherman after shouting, which resulted in the officers mercilessly beating Sherman to death. Later, when more razor blades appeared in candy, it became clear that Sherman had been innocent. The legend claims that if one looks into a mirror and says Candyman's name 5 times, he will emerge and claim the life of whoever called him. Later that evening, Anthony immersed himself in his work, producing a series of paintings inspired by the Candyman legend. When Brianna walked in, he eagerly showed her his latest creations, which focused on the origin story of Candyman. He explained how Sherman's identity was erased, replaced by the legend of Candyman haunting Cabrini Green, a figure born from brutality and injustice. Brianna observed that his approach was very direct, almost lacking in subtlety, as it depicted violence outright, rather than implying it symbolically. Anthony, however, felt deeply connected to his work, expressing that he'd never felt so sure of his purpose. Brianna encouraged his dedication, noting that Clive would likely appreciate it too. But Anthony had one more thing to add. He explained the legend's eerie challenge. If one says Candyman's name 5 times while looking into a mirror, he supposedly appears and kills the summoner. He teased Brianna, pretending to invoke Candyman, and although she playfully protested, she remained uneasy. After the tense exchange, Brianna noticed something odd about his hand, a painful-looking mark from a bee sting. Anthony brushed it off, acknowledging the sting had hurt. but it had become a persistent irritation. Motivated by the legend, Anthony creates an art installation around Candyman for Brianna's gallery. His display is a mirror where visitors are invited to look at their reflection and call Candyman's name 5 times. However, the audience's reaction is lukewarm, not the response Anthony had hoped for. While there, he meets Finley Stevens, an art critic who dismisses his work, accusing him and other artists of pushing forced social messages. Irritated, Anthony lashes out at another attendee's condescending question and later snaps at Brianna's co-workers, Clive Privler and Jerica Cooper. Clive implies that Anthony only got his exhibit because of Brianna's influence, but Anthony throws an insult back at him before leaving.
Pills to accommodate your summer intern program?
That's not spontaneous. You had that one in the bank.
Yeah, I did.
After the event, Clive and his girlfriend Jerica stay behind to clean up. As they start getting closer, Jerica jokes about Candyman, repeating his name 5 times in front of the mirror to prove nothing will happen. However, to their horror, Candyman appears and brutally kills her. Clive, shocked and desperate, tries to escape, but his attempt is in vain as he's pulled back and meets the same fate. The following morning, Brianna arrives at the gallery and finds a trail of blood, leading to the gruesome sight of Clive and Jerica's bodies. When the news breaks that their bodies were discovered near Anthony's display, he appears strangely detached, even mentioning how pleased he is with the unexpected publicity. Both Brianna and Troy are disturbed by his reaction, and though Anthony tries to explain, Brianna leaves, deeply unsettled by his behavior. Later, Brianna begins to relive a traumatic memory from her childhood. She remembers watching her father take his own life by jumping out of a window. Waking from the flashback, she notices Anthony isn't beside her and goes to find him, only to hear him inside the bathroom, insisting he's fine and keeping the door closed. The following morning, Anthony dives deeper into his research on Candyman and Helen Lyle. At the library, he listens to Helen's recorded notes about her disturbing experiences in Cabrini Green. While in an elevator, Anthony spots a piece of candy on the floor, but when he picks it up, he cuts his finger on a hidden razor blade inside. The sight unnerves him as he catches another glimpse of Candyman's image. Panicked, he falls to the floor, and the elevator rattles. When it finally stops and the doors open, everything is still, leaving Anthony shaken as he exits. Meanwhile, the bee sting on Anthony's hand, which he got while exploring Cabrini Green, begins to worsen, turning into a dark scab that gradually spreads, covering more of his body in a strange, unsettling transformation. He later meets Finley at her apartment for an interview, and talks about his growing resentment toward the gentrification of his neighborhood. Anthony playfully dares Finley to say Candyman's name in the mirror. When she goes to the bathroom to try, Anthony becomes entranced by his own reflection in the mirror outside, where he sees Candyman's image mirroring his own, with a hook replacing his hand. The illusion is so intense that, when Finley returns, he abruptly tells her he has to leave and runs out, clearly disturbed. After Anthony leaves, Finley is attacked in her bathroom by the unseen force of Candyman, who slashes her throat and drags her face against the glass, leaving her brutally injured. At dinner later, Anthony seems detached, unable to focus, and suddenly leaves the table despite Brianna's calls for him to stay. Anthony then meets with Burke again, confessing that he's seeing Candyman's victims and is channeling these visions into his artwork. Burke explains that Candyman symbolizes a series of black men wronged by society over generations. The original story, he tells Anthony, began in the late 1800s with Daniel Robitaille, a talented black artist hired by a wealthy white family. Robitaille and the family's eldest daughter fell in love, and when she became pregnant, her father retaliated by sending a mob after him. They tortured Robitaille, severed his hand, covered him in honey to draw bees, and burned him alive. Brianna later discovers Anthony's disturbing paintings and becomes increasingly worried about his mental state. As she studies the artwork, Anthony appears, telling her not to look at them. He frantically discusses his obsession with Candyman, but Brianna, wanting to prove Candyman isn't real, starts to say the name herself. Anthony reacts violently, smashing the mirrors to stop her.
No! Candyman!
Upset and frightened by his behavior, Brianna tells him to stay away from her and leaves to stay with Troy and Grady. At a local prep school, a group of teenage girls gathers in the bathroom to test the Candyman legend after one of them sees Anthony's exhibit at the gallery. Nervous, one girl backs out before they finish, and another hides in a stall, watching from a safe distance. After nothing happens, the others turn to leave, only to find the door locked, trapping them inside. One girl returns to the mirror, and the others hear terrifying sounds as Candyman's hook tears into her. From her hiding spot, the girl in the stall sees brief, horrifying reflections of her classmates being brutally attacked in the small mirror. Meanwhile, Anthony's body and mind are both deteriorating, with the bee sting worsening and his grasp on reality slipping. In despair and physical pain, he visits a hospital to have his injuries checked, only to learn that his mother had lied to him about his birthplace, concealing details about his origins. He confronts his mother, Anne Marie, who is shocked to see him bring up Candyman in the past at Cabrini Green. She tries to avoid answering, but he persists, finally realizing he was the infant taken decades ago. Anne Marie reveals that although she believed Helen had kidnapped him, Helen was actually trying to save him from Candyman, who had dark plans for him even back then. Anne Marie explains she hid the truth so that he could live a normal life. She also shares that the community made a pact to never speak of Candyman again, fearing that doing so would revive the curse. Anthony is devastated and angry, feeling betrayed. Despite his mother's tearful apology, he leaves, hurt by her long-held secrecy. Returning home, Troy and Brianna are concerned to find Anthony missing. Remembering that he had first learned about Candyman from Burke, Brianna heads to Cabrini Green in search of him. Once there, Burke captures her and takes her to an abandoned church, where Anthony, in a trance-like state, waits while his physical decay worsens. Terrified, Brianna looks at Anthony's deteriorating condition, as Burke explains that he sees Candyman as a symbol of resistance against injustice. In Burke's view, Anthony is destined to become the new Candyman, joining the legacy of figures like Daniel Robitaille and Sherman Fields. With this belief, Burke amputates Anthony's right hand and fits a hook in its place. Brianna manages to free herself as police arrive on the scene. Burke gives chase, but Brianna defends herself, stabbing him with a pen until he collapses, dead. Anthony, weak and barely conscious, stumbles toward Brianna and collapses into her arms. Just then, the police enter, and without hesitation, shoot Anthony, killing him instantly. In police custody, Brianna finds herself facing a group of corrupt officers. The lead cop pressures her to either pin all the murders on Anthony or implicate herself as an accomplice. Understanding their game, Brianna makes a deal, asking to see herself in the mirror in return for cooperating with their demands. Once in front of the mirror, she summons Candyman. Moments later, one officer emerges from the building with his throat slashed, and soon Anthony, now transformed into the spirit of Candyman, appears and begins to take down the remaining officers. The lead cop tries to escape, but Anthony follows him relentlessly. Brianna steps out of the police car and watches as Anthony finishes off the last cop. In a final haunting transformation, a swarm of bees surrounds Anthony, and he takes on the appearance of Daniel Robitaille. As more officers arrive on the scene, Robitaille makes a single solemn request to Brianna. Tell everyone. Did this story spook you out? Let us know in the comments below. For more horror movie recaps, subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next one. Fear awaits you.